Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Ireland Crimes and Mysteries. I want to thank you for joining me today, and if you're a returning listener, I want to say a big thank you for your continued support. If this is your first time listening to my podcast, welcome. It's great to have you on board. So without further ado, let's get started on today's story. Ireland Crimes and Mysteries is presented by GoLoud, Ireland's leading audio publisher and the home of Irish podcasts. Find new episodes on the podcast first on the GoLoud app and on your favourite podcast platform. Hey guys, and welcome to this week's episode of Ireland Crimes and Mysteries. Now before we begin, I just want to give you a quick warning. This episode deals with the murder of a young girl and includes some graphic and upsetting details. Please use your discretion when listening. In the Kildare suburb of Leixlip, the Kriégal home sat near the border of Dublin, surrounded by rows of semi-detached houses and leafy estates. From the outside, it looked like any other quiet Irish neighbourhood. The loudest sound in the evening was the rush of the commuter trains. Inside that house lived Patrick and Geraldine Kriégal and their only daughter Anna. Anna had been born in 2004 in Russia. At just 2 years old, she was adopted by Patrick and Geraldine through an international agency and brought to Ireland. Her parents later described how the small child they met in the Russian orphanage was shy but observant, quietly watching everything around her as she adjusted to the safety of a real home for the first time. With medical support and early intervention, Anna adjusted quickly to life in Ireland. Regular checkups, speech therapy and her parents' patient encouragement helped her overcome the developmental delays she'd arrived with. According to later testimony, those early years were full of small milestones. Learning English, starting play school and building confidence one day at a time. Settling into life in Ireland wasn't easy. Anna faced significant early life health issues, partial deafness in one ear and problems with her eyesight. She wore glasses and hearing aids from a young age, small, visible differences that sometimes made her self-conscious at school. In later interviews, her mother said Anna struggled to hear conversations clearly and often withdrew when she couldn't follow what was being said. She was a bright, artistic girl, Geraldine told reporters, but she was lonely. Teachers and classmates remembered Anna as polite, creative and eager to make friends. She loved dance and performance. At home, she spent hours on YouTube tutorials, sketching and experimenting with video editing apps. Her parents described her as imaginative. She loved to decorate her notebooks with doodles and lyrics, yet beneath that creativity was a deep sensitivity. Anna's years in secondary level education were marked by bouts of bullying that left a visible impact. Schoolmates later told Gardaí that she had been taunted over her appearance and accent. She was tall for her age, stood out easily and had a soft, distinctive voice. According to her family, she often came home upset and retreated to her bedroom, sometimes posting videos online that hinted at isolation and low self-esteem. By 2018, Anna was attending Confee College in Leixlip, having previously gone to Scull San Carlo and was taking part in the Kildare Youth Services counselling programme. Her parents had encouraged the sessions after noticing changes in her mood. Geraldine would later say that her daughter was trying hard to start fresh. She'd cut her hair, begun experimenting with new styles, and was talking about joining a dance group that summer. The Kriégal family were deeply protective of her. Geraldine worked in education, and Patrick, originally from France, was devoted to Anna's routines, collecting her from classes, checking her social media use, and trying to keep her connected with her peers. Despite their efforts, the teen years remained difficult terrain for Anna. At home, Anna found comfort in routine, music, pets and drawing. She was fascinated by online culture, anime, vlogs and dance clips. And like many young teens, she used those online spaces to escape real-world pressures. But behind the scenes, there was a growing sense of isolation. A social worker later testified that Anna longed for friendship more than anything. Her parents have spoken candidly about those months before May 2018. They said Anna had been doing better. She was attending counselling regularly, opening up more at home, and had recently expressed pride at passing a school exam. We thought she was turning a corner, Geraldine recalled. By spring that year, Anna had just turned 14. She was still shy but becoming more independent. She'd begun to walk to her appointments alone, something that gave her a sense of maturity. Friends said she was excited about the upcoming summer break and talked about wanting to reinvent herself for secondary school next term. No one in Leixlip could have imagined that a girl known mostly for her gentle nature and artistic flair would soon become the focus of Ireland's most disturbing modern murder trial. Yet those ordinary details, the sketchbooks, the YouTube videos, are what her parents and friends still remember. A teenager trying, like any other, to find her place in the world. Anna wasn't just creative, she lived for it. She spent hours dancing with the Leixlip troupe, Dance LA, the same group who later formed a guard of honour at her funeral in red headscarves. She loved to sing and had her heart set on learning guitar. Because she was tall and strong for her age, she took to swimming naturally. She also put her hand up for anything that helped others. Just before her death, she agreed to model in a school fashion show to raise money for charity. Anna stayed close to her Russian beginnings too. Her parents had marked her adoption years earlier with a matryoshka doll, holding her picture, and at her funeral a Russian flag which represented her heritage was presented, along with her headphones and a memory box from her classmates at Confi College. She adored family breaks in France as well, and a tiny Eiffel Tower lay beside her as a symbol of those trips. More than anything, she loved quiet Sundays curled up with her mam watching a fairy tale movie and eating popcorn. Monday, the 14th of May 2018 began like most school days. Anna attended a counselling session in the afternoon, part of a routine that was helping her regain confidence after a difficult term. She came home around 4 p.m, changed out of her school uniform into a hoodie and leggings and chatted briefly with her mother before heading upstairs to her room. Shortly after 5 p.m, a knock sounded at the front door. Geraldine answered. Standing outside was a boy from Anna's school, known only as Boy B during later proceedings. He asked whether Anna was at home and said another friend, Boy A, wanted to see her. Geraldine later told Gardaí she was surprised. Anna didn't usually have male friends calling, but her daughter seemed pleased. She grabbed her phone and left with him, telling her mum she'd be back soon. That was the last time anyone in the Kriégal household saw Anna alive. When Anna hadn't returned by dinner, her mother began to worry. She called her phone several times but got no answer. By 9 p.m, Geraldine and Patrick drove around the area looking for her. They checked the local park, playground, and the route between their house and the youth cafe. Nothing. At 9:49 p.m, they contacted Leixlip Garda Station to report her missing. A file was opened that night. Within hours, Gardaí also shared Anna's photograph through official social media channels and requested national radio stations to carry the alert overnight, an early use of online coordination in a missing child search. By morning, an official missing persons alert had been circulated. Gardaí coordinated with Kildare County Civil Defence and dozens of volunteers. Posters bearing Anna's photo appeared on lampposts and shop windows across Leixlip, Lucan and Selbridge. RTE News carried short bulletins describing her as 5'8", slim build, dark hair, last seen wearing a black hoodie and white runners. As the days passed, the search widened. Drone footage and riverbank sweeps were conducted near the Liffey. Officers worked methodically through CCTV from local estates, bus routes and train stations. Nothing showed Anna leaving Leixlip that evening, suggesting she'd stayed within walking distance. By Wednesday, the 16th of May, Gardaí began interviewing her classmates. It emerged that Boy B had called to her house that evening she disappeared. He told investigators that he'd walked with Anna part of the way towards St. Catherine's Park, then left her there to meet Boy A. When questioned later, Boy A initially denied meeting her at all. The park became the focal point of the search. It straddled the Kildare-Dublin border, a vast wooded area popular with families and joggers. Volunteers combed every trail, assisted by dogs and Garda helicopter support. The sheer size of the train made progress painfully slow. On Thursday the 17th of May, 4 days after Anna vanished, 2 Gardaí searching an abandoned farmhouse at Glenwood House, Lucan, found the body of a teenage girl inside. The building was derelict, windows boarded, roof sagging, walls covered in graffiti. It had long been known locally as a hangout spot for teens. The area was immediately sealed off, and the Kriégal family were notified that evening. Later that night, forensic teams entered the property. They confirmed the remains were Anna's. The discovery ended the search, but began one of the most complex investigations in modern Irish policing. Within hours, detectives from the Garda National Bureau of Criminal Investigation and the Technical Bureau were on site. Every footprint, fibre and trace was catalogued. Gardaí recovered fragments of blue Tescon tape around her neck and nearby objects that would later form part of the murder evidence. At the family home, officers, as I said, informed Geraldine and Patrick that Anna had been found. They were told gently but firmly that her injuries were consistent with homicide. In interviews afterwards, Geraldine said, "We knew she was gone, but hearing it, there are no words." The discovery shocked the country. Newspapers carried front-page headlines. Vigils were held in Leixlip and Lucan. What began as a missing person search had become a murder inquiry. Few could grasp that the suspects would turn out to be children themselves. By the evening of the 17th of May 2018, Glenwood House was no longer just an abandoned building. Blue and white Garda tape marked the perimeter, and a forensic tent glowed faintly under the floodlights brought in after dark. What had started, as I said, as a missing person search was now a major crime scene, and every bit of evidence found inside would have to stand up in court one day. Members of the Garda Technical Bureau worked under the direction of the State Pathologist's office. They logged each entry to the house, noted the time and moved methodically through the rooms. Every surface was photographed before anything was touched. Soil samples were lifted from beneath the body. Fragments of clothing and that blue builder's tape were sealed in paper evidence bags, and a detailed map of the room was drawn to scale. The derelict condition of the building made the work slow. There were holes in the floors, damp walls and years of rubbish. But investigators were determined to preserve every possible trace. Forensic officers identified blood staining and fibre transfer consistent with a violent assault. They recorded evidence of multiple blunt force impacts and recovered the adhesive tape that would later prove critical. Each item was double bagged, labelled and signed across the seal to protect the chain of custody. Nearby, ununiformed Gardaí stood guard at the outer cordon, turning back onlookers who had gathered as word spread that the missing girl had been found. Shortly after midnight, Anna's body was removed from the scene under the supervision of the state pathologist. The transport was done discreetly as officers and forensic staff paused for a moment before the vehicle left. The remains were taken to the state laboratory at Whitehall for post-mortem examination. At the same time, key exhibits from Glenwood House were driven under escort to the Forensic Science Ireland Laboratory, FSI, for priority testing. The liaison officers who had delivered the news to Anna's parents stayed with them, explaining how the next steps would unfold, the post-mortem, the evidence analysis, the investigation ahead. The following morning, Garda headquarters released a short statement confirming that the body discovered in Lucan has been formally identified as that of 14-year-old Anna Kriegel. The post-mortem examination carried out by the state pathologist concluded that Anna had died from severe blunt force trauma to the head and neck. The injuries were extensive and consistent with multiple blows. Additional findings showed that adhesive tape had been used around her neck, and there was evidence of sexual assault. The report established that Anna had been killed on the same day she disappeared, Monday the 14th of May 2018, narrowing the investigative window to just a few hours that evening. As those results came through, Gardaí from Leixlip, Lucan and the National Bureau of Criminal Investigation began piecing together Anna's final movements. The search teams who had scoured St. Catherine's Park only days earlier were now retasked to look for discarded clothing or tools that might correspond with the injuries described by the pathologist. Specialist divers swept the Liffey shallows while canine units traced woodland paths linking the park to the derelict house. Inside the Lucan Garda station, a dedicated incident room was established under the major investigation management system known as Holmes 2. Officers input every statement, call log and CCTV capture into a single digital record. It quickly highlighted patterns, the timing of the knock at the Kriégal door, the route towards St. Catherine's Park, and the absence of any sighting of Anna beyond that point. On Friday the 18th of May, the Garda Press Office appealed for information about anyone who might have seen Anna with companions in the Leixlip or Lucan area on Monday evening. The appeal was cautious and factual, omitting details that could compromise interviews. At the same time, detectives quietly re-interviewed the 2 teenage boys who had been among the last to see her. Their initial accounts now carried greater significance in the light of the forensic discoveries. The forensic process was already producing early correlations. Trace paint and adhesive samples recovered from Glenwood House were matched to a specific brand of construction tape, a length of Tescon insulating tape, commonly sold in hardware stores. Fibres consistent with Anna's clothing were identified on items within the room. DNA analysis confirmed her presence and detected partial profiles from more than one individual, findings that would later underpin the prosecution case. All this work unfolded in strict confidentiality. Irish law required the investigation to remain within procedural boundaries until formal charges could be brought. Throughout May and June 2018, Gardaí conducted door-to-door inquiries, examined hours of CCTV and took dozens of witness statements from park users and residents. Civil defence volunteers continued to assist with line searches in case additional exhibits had been discarded. The level of coordination reflected how seriously the case was being handled. This was not a routine investigation, but one involving a child victim and potentially child suspects. For the Kriégal family, these weeks passed in a blur of grief and official process. Friends and neighbours organised vigils in Leixlip and Lucan, lighting candles at St Mary's Church and placing flowers at the gates of St Catherine's Park. Across Ireland, people followed the updates with disbelief, trying to understand how a girl who had simply gone out to meet friends could end up murdered within sight of her own neighbourhood. Behind the scenes, senior officers prepared briefing files for the Director of Public Prosecutions. The evidence from Glenwood House, blood, fibres, adhesive tape, digital data would soon be matched against statements taken from the 2 boys. Detectives knew they were approaching a critical point. Once the DPP reviewed the material, formal arrests could follow. For now, they continued to build the picture, layer by layer, guided by science rather than just speculation. By early summer, the Garda investigation had become one of the most closely monitored in the state. Every action, from lab testing to interview scheduling, was logged for accountability. The tone remained measured, even as media attention intensified. Senior Gardaí reminded reporters that minors are entitled to the full protection of the law, a line that highlighted both the sensitivity and the seriousness of what lay ahead. The case had moved far beyond the shock of discovery. It was now an exercise in methodical proof, establishing how Anna was lured from her home, how she ended up inside Glenwood House, and who was responsible for the violence that ended her life. Those answers would emerge in the months that followed, inside the courtroom, where the forensic trail from that derelict building would become the backbone of Ireland's most disturbing juvenile murder trial. By early summer 2018, detectives working from the incident room in Lucan had begun assembling the chain of proof that would become central to Ireland's first juvenile murder trial in living memory. Using the National Case Management System Holmes 2, they cross-referenced thousands of data points, witness interviews, CCTV, phone activity, forensic results, to build a clear timeline of Anna Kriegel's final hours. The 2 teenagers, as I said, that would later become known as Boy A and Boy B, had already been interviewed as witnesses. Each had given differing accounts of that Monday evening. When forensic results from Glenwood House confirmed male DNA and matched the adhesive tape used in the assault, investigators quietly shifted their focus. On the morning of the 24th of May 2018, both boys were arrested under Section 4 of the Criminal Justice Act and brought separately to Garda stations for questioning in the presence of guardians and solicitors, a legal requirement when minors are detained. During the interviews, each was treated as a child-in-law, but questioned under the same evidential standards as any suspect. Boy B admitted calling to Anna's home and walking with her towards St. Catherine's Park, but denied any further involvement. Boy A initially denied seeing her at all. When shown discrepancies between his account and CCTV footage placing him near the park that evening, he maintained he had gone there alone. The inconsistencies deepened. Over subsequent days, search warrants were executed at both boys' homes. Gardaí seized clothing, footwear, mobile phones and school backpacks. FSI analysis revealed traces of Anna's blood on items belonging to Boy A and on a length of adhesive tape found among his possessions. Digital examination of his phone uncovered internet searches for violent pornography and references to Russian teenagers. Details later ruled inadmissible to the jury but recorded in court documentation. CCTV and witness statements placed both boys together en route from Leixlip towards Lucan on the 14th of May, returning separately later that evening. Forensic soil analysis linked particles on Boy A's boots to samples taken from inside Glenwood House. Each result tightened the evidential net. When the Director of Public Prosecutions reviewed the file, it was directed that both be charged with murder. Boy A also faced a count of aggravated sexual assault. The decision was historic. 2 13-year-old defendants facing the Central Criminal Court for murder. Gardaí escorted them under strict anonymity orders to their first court appearance in July 2018. Reporting restrictions under Section 252 of the Children's Act 2001 prevented any identification of the boys or their families. The case moved slowly through pre-trial hearings while forensic specialists finalised reports. Over 200 witness statements and nearly 500 exhibits were scheduled. Prosecutors from the Office of the DPP coordinated with FSI experts, pathologists and Garda technical analysts to ensure every document met disclosure standards. Defence teams sought to exclude certain materials, arguing that juvenile interviews required heightened scrutiny. The trial judge, Mr. Justice Paul McDermott, set firm guidelines on admissibility and reminded jurors once impanelled that compassion must never replace evidence. What the jury heard about their backgrounds was limited and carefully handled. So what do we know about these two boys? Well, evidence showed Boy A hadn't been in trouble with the Gardaí and didn't drink or use drugs. He was tall for his age, trained in martial arts and spent a lot of time online and liked horror, makeup effects, drawing and video games. Peers sometimes described him as odd or not a rational thinker. Boy B, on the other hand, was often described as very bright. He was good with his hands and tech. He liked Pokemon and Japanese cartoons and wasn't interested in sport. A psychologist told the court he preferred the company of younger kids because he found them less demanding, unusual but not deviant. His father said he was hungry for friendship and tended to believe what friends told him. The friendship between the two boys had cooled by the time of the investigation and they deliberately avoided one another in court. Now, just a quick note on what criminal trials can and can't do. Courts are good at answering one narrow question. Is there enough proof beyond a reasonable doubt that the accused committed the offence? That's what the jury ultimately decide here. What they could not decide, because it isn't the jury's job, basically, was why Anna was lured to that house or why she was killed. Any assessment of motive falls to professional reports the judge receives before sentencing. So on the 29th of April 2019, the courtroom filled with journalists, Garda witnesses, forensic scientists and the families of both the victim and the accused. Proceedings opened with a reminder from the judge. No one under 18 may be named. It was a rule every outlet did respect. Under Irish law, the boys cannot be named. Not then, not now, and not in the future without a court order. It is a criminal offence to identify them. In this script, they will remain Boy A and Boy B as used throughout the trial reporting. The prosecution case, led by Senior Counsel Brendan Grahan SC, unfolded methodically. Jurors were shown maps, photographs of Glenwood House and testimony describing how Anna had left home with Boy B to meet Boy A. Colleagues from the Technical Bureau outlined how evidence was logged and transferred. The state pathologist, Professor Mary Cassidy, testified in person. In measured clinical terms, she outlined the full extent of Anna's injuries. More than 50 separate wounds, the most severe to her head and neck. Her findings confirmed that Anna died from blunt force trauma with additional evidence of compression around the neck. She told the court that adhesive tape had been used but was not the cause of death. Both boys were excused from the courtroom while her evidence was heard because of its graphic nature. Later, Forensic Science Ireland, or FSI, presented their findings. Tests showed that semen on Anna's top matched Boy A's DNA, and that Anna's blood had been found on Boy A's boots, which had been seized earlier in the investigation. Anna's parents, Geraldine and Patrick, remained seated throughout, quietly holding hands, as Professor Cassidy described what had been done to their daughter. Professor Cassidy also told the court that Anna had suffered a sexual assault. Her examination found evidence of penetration or attempted penetration with an unidentified object. She could not say whether Anna was conscious at the time. Forensic Science Ireland later confirmed that semen recovered from Anna's clothing, as I said, matched Boy A's DNA, forming the basis of the additional charge of aggravated sexual assault, a charge that reflected the extreme violence of the attack. Witnesses recall seeing the boys together near the park at around 5:30 p.m. One passerby described them heading towards the derelict property. Another saw Boy A emerge alone later that evening. The defence cross-examined each, suggesting misidentification or innocent explanations, but the cumulative pattern just was too compelling, really. Digital evidence played a crucial role. Mobile network analysis showed both phones inactive for a period consistent with the estimated time of death. When reactivated, they registered in the Lucan cell area, placing them close to Glenwood House. Investigators combined CCTV with phone examinations to map movements and activity that evening. Throughout the trial, Anna's parents, as I said, sat quietly in court, supported by the family liaison officers. Reporters noted their composure as each technical witness testified. The proceedings lasted 6 weeks. Counsel for Boy A and Boy B stressed their age and lack of prior records. They challenged the reliability of teenage statements under interview conditions and questioned whether their forensic traces could definitively prove participation beyond reasonable doubt. In closing submissions, the defence urged jurors to remember that children can make mistakes in recollection. The prosecution replied that while age demanded fairness, it did not erase responsibility. The physical evidence, they said, was unambiguous. Anna Kriegel entered Glenwood House alive with the two boys and never came out. After the 6 weeks of testimony, the jury retired to consider their verdicts on Friday the 14th of June 2019. They deliberated for roughly 14 hours over 3 days, returning on Tuesday the 18th to deliver their decision. Boy A was found guilty of murder and guilty of aggravated sexual assault. Boy B was found guilty of murder. In the packed courtroom, Geraldine and Patrick Kriégal held hands as the verdicts were read. The judge thanked the jurors for their care and reminded the media once again of the anonymity orders. Sentencing would be set for a later date, pending pre-sentence reports. For the Garda team, the verdict closed the investigative chapter that had begun in the dark at Glenwood House, but opened another. how a nation would now reckon with what two children had done to another. When the jury delivered its verdicts, the courtroom, as I said, fell silent. For 6 weeks, jurors had listened to harrowing detail, forensic evidence, phone records, maps and witness accounts. And now two boys, both just 14 at the time of the trial, had been found guilty of murdering Anna Kriegel. Boy A was also convicted of aggravated sexual assault. Between June and November 2019, each boy was assessed by the Probation Service, the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service and other state agencies. Irish law requires a full evaluation of a juvenile's background, maturity and rehabilitation prospects before sentence could be decided. These reports remain sealed, their contents known only to the court and parties involved. On the 5th of November 2019, both boys returned to the Central Criminal Court for sentencing. Public galleries were full, though reporting restrictions still applied. No names, no identifying details. The courtroom was quiet as Geraldine and Patrick Kriégal were invited to give their victim impact statements. Geraldine stood to speak for both of them. Her voice, according to reporters present, was steady but heartbreakingly clear. Anna was our strength, our light, our beautiful girl. Every day we wake knowing she's not here. Every day is the same, an ache that doesn't fade. She described how her daughter had loved art, music and laughter, how her room had remained untouched since May 2018. Her husband added that there was no forgiveness, only loss. Reporters noted that even the defence benches remained still during the statement. When the family finished, the judge thanked them for what he called dignity and composure in the face of unimaginable pain. Then the court moved to sentencing. Under Irish law, life imprisonment is the mandatory sentence for murder. But because both offenders were juveniles, the judge was required to set review periods. After reviewing the reports and submissions from both defence teams, Mr. Justice McDermott delivered his decision. Boy A, a life sentence for murder, to be reviewed after 12 years, plus 12 years concurrent for aggravated sexual assault. Boy B, 15 years detention, to be reviewed after 8 years. Both were committed to secure detention in Oberstown Children's Detention Campus, where they would remain until reaching adulthood, after which further decisions on imprisonment would be made by the Minister for Justice following review. The judge emphasised that the review periods were not guarantees of release, only opportunities for assessment. He addressed both teenagers directly, reminding them that they had been tried and convicted according to the law, and that the sentences reflected both accountability and the potential for rehabilitation. What you did took away a young life, he said. That cannot be undone. Outside the courthouse, members of the public gathered behind barriers as journalists reported the outcome. There was no celebration, only solemn acknowledgement. Many described the case as one that had changed the country's sense of itself. Statement from Children's Rights Alliance, Bernardo's and legal experts followed in the days after sentencing. Each recognised the difficulty of sentencing minors for such an extreme crime. The debate extended beyond punishment to questions of prevention. How Ireland supports children at risk of violence and how communities respond when a child commits a crime of this magnitude. For the Kriégal family, the judgment brought structure, not closure. In interviews that followed, Geraldine said, "We wanted justice for Anna. We have that now. But there's no sense of victory, only her absence." The couple thanked Gardaí, the legal teams and their community in Leixlip for the care shown throughout the investigation and the trial. In 2021, Boy A lodged an appeal against his conviction and sentence, challenging aspects of the trial procedure and admissibility of statements. In October 2022, Boy B withdrew his appeal against conviction. His 15-year sentence with 8-year review stands. The anonymity orders remain in place for life unless lifted by court order, something the judge described as essential to the principle of juvenile justice. In 2023, Both offenders remained in custody under the management of the Irish Prison Services and Oberstown, transitioning between youth and adult systems as they approached legal adulthood. The review periods 8 and 12 years mean their first formal sentence reviews are due in the early 2030s. The case prompted national reflection. Commentators described it as Ireland's darkest juvenile crime, comparable in impact to the James Bulger case in the UK, though handled with markedly more restraint in reporting. The Department of Justice confirmed that elements of the Garda investigation, particularly the child interview protocols and the digital forensic handling, were later used as reference models for training. Educational psychologists called for renewed focus on early intervention programmes, noting that both perpetrators had displayed signs of isolation and behavioural issues in their early teens. Advocacy groups stressed that while justice had been served, the lessons lay in prevention, recognising vulnerability and social alienation before tragedy occurs. The Children's Ombudsman commented that the case highlighted the balance Ireland must maintain between accountability and the possibility of change. That tension, he said, was at the heart of any justice system dealing with minors. In Leixlip and in Lucan, memorial services continued each May. Locals still placed flowers near St Catherine's Park and candles at the gates of Glenwood House. In the years since the trial, Glenwood House has remained standing, boarded up and fenced off, its windows sealed and grounds overgrown. The site is technically a protected structure, which has delayed any plans for demolition. Local representatives and even the then Taoiseach Leo Varadkar supported removing it, saying it should never again be a place that draws curiosity or pain. The Anna Foundation, established by her family, began working with schools and youth organisations to promote anti-bullying awareness and support for isolated teens. More than 6 years on, Anna Kriegel's case still lingers in people's minds, not only because of what happened to her, but because of how deeply it affected the country. How justice can bring answers, but never undo the loss. So guys, that's it for today's episode of the Ireland Crimes and Mysteries podcast. Again, thanks for your listenership, and don't forget to subscribe to the show and hit that auto download so you never miss an episode. Until the next time, keep your eyes open and your mind curious. This podcast has been compiled from information gathered in the public sphere, like news articles, documentaries and open source material that can be found on the web. Everything in this podcast is alleged unless a conviction has taken place.